Chris, do you find yourself? I was talking to my mother this morning, and I said last night for the first time in a while, or yesterday afternoon. I love boxing, so they had these fights on in Saudi Arabia, which was perfect because they're on Saudi Arabia time. It was during the afternoon in Phoenix, so I don't have to stay out late. And so I got home last. It was like 8 o'clock or whatever, and I'm one of those people like I just don't go out and socialize much anymore because I'm just always looking at stuff, always, and I have a hard time committing to anything because you just don't know what you're missing, right? Like with the work that we're in, covering all this stuff. Am I alone here, or do you feel the same?
Yeah, it is kind of weird. I mean, I was out all day Friday because I bought a new vehicle, and it's just a hassle. You have to go all through all this stuff. It's actually it wasn't that big a deal. I had a few things to do. So anyway, I was out most of the day, and I got back in. I kind of felt like like I missed something. But then I looked and like nothing really happened that it was all that interesting. You can easily get caught up in it, and it's understandable, especially younger people, why they become almost obsessed with being online or they're chronically online because it always feels like something's happening. And I try to like stay off of Twitter for certain parts of the day. You'll notice my Twitter activity usually is like morning, and then I'll do some at lunchtime, and it's around usually when I'm eating, so or getting ready to eat. So it's around those times. That way, I'm not frittering away my day screwing around on Twitter. But it's easy to do. I mean, there's days where, like it's been rainy, I got nothing to do. You sit on the couch and I wind up, spending 3 hours scanning Twitter and maybe listening to YouTube channels.
What an amazing time it is right now to be covering all this stuff. I can't keep up. I mean, how do you do it?
Yeah, I mean, there's some subjects I just don't bother following. It's like I don't really stay that up to date on the Palestinian stuff and all that. I just, if there's a reason to follow it, I will. But yeah, you got to pick and choose. It's funny. We're starting to do the show where Paul Ramsey and I are doing a show on Wednesdays, and we're just going to feel our way through it. And one of the things we're going to do this week is we're going to talk about Nixon. And the reason for that is we're both of the roughly the same age, and we kind of remember as kids what happened with Nixon. We're really probably too young to appreciate it, but we're in a really wild age, and that all these things that a lot of paleocons and the political thinkers said it would eventually. This is how things would unfold. Well, they are unfolding this way. The blob in Washington is finally starting to come unglued, and we're starting to get back to some normalcy. It's kind of weird. It's weird and it's neat to live through a historical change. We're going through this big change, and 10 years from now, the world will look vastly different. And people think, oh yeah, everybody says this, but I grew up. I was a teenager in the 1980s, and it was a wild time. We were getting ready. We were at the end of the Cold War. We didn't realize we were at the end of the Cold War, but we were. The world was changing, and it just felt like all this excitement was happening. And now I look back at it, and I can't even remember what it felt like. It just seems like an alien place. It's just the 80s and early 90s are just a different world, and they were. And that's what's happening now. There's an old saying, some decades nothing happens, and then there's weeks where decades happen, and that we're in one of those periods where a whole lot of stuff is happening. And look, Donald Trump, we're never going to see a guy like this again. He is a unique figure. This is a guy you will never see again. I mean, think about all the stuff that this guy's been through and what he's doing. I mean, he is a historical figure. We're in a period like when it was like to be when FDR was in office. All of a sudden, all this stuff is happening, and the world seems to be changing. That's where we're in now, and young people will go their whole lives and never see another Donald Trump.
Yeah, he really is a phenomenon. Like him or hate him, in sports, I compare it to Michael Jordan. I mean, I'm old enough to know, remember that whole period, and he is that for politics, and we'll never see this again.
Yeah, it's funny to say that because when I was a young guy, the NBA was nobody watched it, right? I think it was the '84 championship game was on tape delay. They didn't even put it live, and you watched it in the evening. It was out. That's how popular basketball until Bird Magic came along, right? All of a sudden, they were just these guys. And I remember sitting with one of my friends watching one of these games. I think we were actually at the game, and we looked at each other and go, we're never going to see something like this again. These phenomenal. I mean, it was a whole period of just a collection of extraordinary players, and yet quickly everyone forgets. 10 years later, Michael Jordan. And now I imagine that young people who are following sports, they can't really relate to Michael Jordan. So maybe the same thing will be with Trump. 10 years from now, people will say, I barely remember him. He'll just, because, we live in a mass media age and things just kind of come at us quickly. But yeah, it's funny. It is a good sports analogy because Tom Brady is another one. I mean, there's a guy you're never going to see twice, and you know, I think with Trump, what's even more, unlike a sports figure, is that history, there will be people who write their PhD thesis on Donald Trump. There's not going to be anybody doing this for Michael Jordan or Tom Brady or Larry Bird or anything like that. Trump will be a world historic figure. People will talk about putting him on the money, which would be interesting. Um, one day we could be, having $100 bills with Donald Trump's face on them.
God, I could just see people on the left right now just cringing, like all of the LGBTQ and the pink haired women just dying right now, listening to you say that.
Yeah, you know what though? They always move on. They find a new boogeyman. I remember when I was a kid, I used to play chess, and there was this older guy. Well, he was an old guy relative to me, and he hated Nixon. And all you had to do was bring up Nixon, and you could destroy him at chess. The guy was a good chess player, but if you brought up Nixon, he was emotionally overwrought over Nixon. And no one cares about Nixon now. No one cared about Reagan. I remember all the pink hairs of that day. He hated Reagan. And George Bush. Remember all the rallies with pictures of Bush with the little mustache on him and all this stuff? Now they all agree with George Bush. They're actually saying, "Oh, why couldn't Trump be like George Bush?" So, they'll find a new boogeyman. There'll be somebody. It'll be Barron, maybe. Although Barron being 7 feet tall might be too terrifying for them.
So what is grabbing your attention right now with everything going on?
Well, the thing I'm watching right now, and I'm going to write about this tomorrow, is watching Zelensky kill himself. He, he's negotiating himself into the electric chair. It's the craziest thing, look, he should just sign whatever piece of paper is given in front of him, just and hope for the best. But instead, he's giving Trump the business, and I guess he thinks that somehow or other Trump is bluffing, and they're going to turn the lights out on Zelensky. And it really is amazing to see somebody be so stupid, especially when the stakes are so high. But history's full of guys like this who somehow or other get into a position of authority, get into an important position, and then from there make every conceivable mistake. And that's what you're seeing with Zelensky. I wouldn't be shocked if by July 4th he's no longer alive. He winds up, he's gone. He could be gone next week. It's gone so bad. And that's a big deal because look, basically, after the Cold War, we should have shut down NATO. We should have shut down all this stuff, but we didn't. We didn't have a peace dividend. And that's what's coming here. People don't realize it. The huge bases in Germany and all over Europe and Italy, they're going to start, the next 10 years, they're going to get shrunk down. And, because they're not necessary. There's no need for it. The Russians are not going to invade. Russians just want to sell the Europeans oil, gas, whatever else they got to sell, agricultural products, fertilizer. We don't need it. We don't need that stuff. And that means, the whole relationship with Europe's going to change. The world's going to change. It's going to be a different place and a better place because our government will care more about us rather than a bunch of foreigners, which would be a nice change.
Do you think though with Zelensky, I mean, we were the ones that put him into power, right? Back in 2019.
Yeah, I mean, his predecessor. There's an oligarch. I forgot what the guy's name is. Komoisky, I believe his name is. He was the guy that was sort of the go-between that the neocons worked with to put Poroshenko, I think his name was. He was the first guy that came in after the coup in 2014, and then we got tired of Poroshenko and we put in Zelensky. And yeah, I mean, he's a creation of our foreign policy establishment, but he chose poorly. There's an old saying that one thing worse than being an enemy of the United States is being an ally, and he's learning that lesson the hard way. Because United States is a big, powerful country. We could live without Ukraine. And so if that project stops working out, we'll just change our mind. That's the history of the world, and small countries are supposed to understand that. And Zelensky, he just didn't play his cards right. I mean, who knows? Maybe he comes out on top. Maybe he ends up in Switzerland, living in a beautiful mansion somewhere, or because who knows how many billions he squirreled away of our money. I'm guessing he probably tries to flee to Qatar or the UAE or something. But but he made too many mistakes, and all the mistakes he made was is kind of like a guy at the craps table who just keeps going all in, figuring he can't lose, and at some point he starts losing, and that's where he is now. And I joked around last week. Was it last week? Yeah, last week when they were all in Europe, and I just had this imagine that Hegseth and Vance. Yeah, they got Zelensky in the bathroom. They're pushing his head in the toilet. Where's our money? Where's our money?
Like Big Lebowski, like Big Lebowski.
Yeah, yeah. It's
I
like,
don't know. It's down there somewhere.
and because I mean that's the way this is looking. Every time he says, tells Trump that, oh, I need a better deal, Trump gives him a worse deal. I mean, it's like dealing with the mafia. So, but it's a fun thing to watch, because look, my bet was is that he wouldn't live to see 2026. So I'm starting to look like a genius on that one. So we'll see.
What does Putin want, and then how is the United States right now able to deliver that? Because to me, and correct me here, based on other conversations I've had, is Putin, he has all the cards. So what can the United States do to facilitate this? Because I was reading something earlier that this might be over within a week.
I think I mean, anything could happen. I mean, the Ukrainian army is in a lot of trouble, but I mean, these guys are, they're tough fighters, and they have a lot of disadvantages. But look, Putin, for there's, the first thing they want is these Russian-speaking areas to be, they're going to be a part of Russia, and that's it. My guess is that the deal they would like to have is, a completely demilitarized Ukraine. They don't want the rest of the Ukrainian territory. They've made this clear, and because they have a historical memory, Western Ukraine is full of lunatics. It is famous for this. In that part of the world, Galicia is known for producing maniacs. It produced a lot of Bolsheviks and Mensheviks and anarchists and libertarians and all kinds of wackos. And the Russians don't want any business any part of that part of the world. And so they're happy with that. But I think what they really want is a deal with the United States for investment. They don't want to be dependent on China. They like doing business with China. China has started opening up factories in Russia and done a lot of things, but they want to be able to do business with the United States as well because we have big energy deals there. There's one in Kazakhstan. We own or American companies own half of this big plant, big oil and gas production facility. There's plans that were put on hold between American companies and Russian companies in the North Pole. The Russians want to do business. That's what they want to do. And they imagine a world, where the big players, China, America, United States, maybe some other countries, India, maybe even Brazil, we keep the peace and we make deals with each other and everyone gets rich. Everyone makes a lot of money. The public is generally happy. That's what they're looking for. And that's not an unreasonable bargain, and I think that's what Trump wants. Trump talks about this all the time. He's a, what does he want? He wants to be the peace president. He wants to end wars, scale back the military, and make it so people can make a lot of money and buy a lot of stuff and enjoy their life. I mean, it's not an unreasonable set of political goals. I mean, if you're a regular American, why wouldn't you want that?
Does Putin also want to demilitarize Ukraine?
Oh yeah, that'll definitely be. They know their they know their history. They understand the United States. There's always the fear Trump moves off the stage, the lunatics come back in power, and they start this all over again. So yeah, I mean, one way or the other, I think Ukraine will be a rump state. So if you looked at the map, Russia will have Odessa, everything in the east of the Dnieper River, and control the Dnieper River. And the Dnieper River is very important because it's a part of the agricultural economy of Ukraine. And then that way, the Russians don't have to worry about the Ukrainians being a problem anymore, or NATO getting any crazy ideas or any of that kind of stuff. And frankly, the Poles and the Romanians and the Hungarians, they're not going to be unhappy with that deal either. They have a historical memory as well, and they understand that the best result for Ukraine is to be a demilitarized and pacified rump state.
So you see this thing closing out here, short order, or is it still?
It's hard to know. 6 months, maybe something like that.
Oh, you
I
see it
mean,
going that much longer.
it could be. I mean, the Russians aren't. The Russians started making. Internally, there's. Some of the Russian news sites are talking about. Uh, you know, May, June, that kind of range. So, the Russians are thinking that that's probably when it wraps up. And then who knows? Maybe they think they'll get a peace deal. Um, one way or the other. It really, I mean, a lot depends upon how the Europeans respond. Zelensky, there's a lot of unknown unknowns at this point. Because look, if Zelensky has an accident and dies, it could be chaos in Ukraine, and that could be a whole bunch of new problems. You have refugees flowing into Poland and Hungary, and that complicates things. So, but I doubt we're talking about Ukraine in 2026.
Well, so okay, so Russia, Ukraine. Now we move over to Europe. The German elections today, and it appears, are they done? The results are completely in.
Well, yeah, I think they got some final stuff there, but it's weird how they do their elections because they kind of count in real time. But it looks like at last I saw the CDU, CSU, which is they're sort of I don't know, they call them the conservatives, but I mean, it's kind of like calling Republicans conservative. But they're at 29%. The SPD was at like 12% or 14%, and AFD is at 20, and then some smaller parties like the Greens and something called BSW. I'm not really. I think there's the Germans got some weird parties. The BSW is like a bunch of very socialist domestically, but they're opposed immigration and they want to ally with Russia, which is kind of a strange agenda. While the AFD is sort of libertarianish and but also nationalist. They're anti-immigration. And then there's another one. Oh, they got the Greens, and then there's FPD, I think it is. That's like a libertarianish party. But it's going to be the same government. The way they do it, they scam their voters just the same way that our two parties scam the voters. They have this big election and they form a government with the same people who were in the last government. So you just had an election and you end up with the same government. You have just different faces on it. You know, but the Germans. I feel bad for them in a way because for 80 years now. When did the Second World War end? 48, 49. So you're talking at least 75 years. They haven't really, they've operated in this tight little box. And now they got to figure out how to be their own country again. And that's going to be hard. I was in Germany. People don't realize Germany is not this modern, up-to-date state. Their telecommunication system is garbage. I mean, you walk around on your mobile device, you're constantly losing a signal. It's very hard to get high-speed internet. I've done business with German companies. They're all backwards technologically. I mean, it's comical sometimes how backwards they are. There's countries in South America that are more advanced technologically than Germany. I mean, we think of the Germans being these high-end engineers, but they're very backwards. Their economy needs a lot of changes, a lot of fixes. So they got a lot of problems, and it's an old aging population. They keep importing all these Muslims and Africans. I mean, it's a mess, and it's not going to be easy to fix. I mean, the French are a little better because the French haven't had to be ashamed of themselves. The French can still be proudly French, and that's a big advantage. But it's not, it doesn't really seem to be helping them. The French have all kinds of problems. The Italians have lots of problems. I mean, the Italians, they are not having any children at all. You're more likely to see, a child, someone under the age of 18 that the odds of seeing someone who has a brother or a sister is like 10%. I mean, people who are having children having one. So, I mean, the Europeans have a ton of problems. I mean, it could turn around quickly. I mean, things can happen. But
What about the UK?
yeah, I mean, they got it's the same kind of. I mean, their government hates their people. I mean, you watch these things that are going on, or Ireland's the same way. The cops show up, knock on somebody's door. We didn't like this tweet, or you posted this on Facebook. They're roughing up old ladies for Facebook posts. I don't mean to laugh. I mean, if it happened to me, I'd be furious. But yeah, it's much worse than we have it here. I mean, we have our own problems, but yeah, nothing like what the Europeans are going through. And look, it's our fault too. We exported this goofy stuff. They were never into multiculturalism until we sent this crap over to them. I mean, the Europeans should hate us because we have not been good caretakers of Europe for the last 30 years. We've done a really terrible job. I say we, our politicians. They have a right to hate our political class as much as we do.
I mean, what does the future of the EU look like? I mean, just some of the things that you briefly described. I don't know about you. I mean, I'm amazed that it's been able to stay together. I'm amazed that all this has been able to stay together as long as it has. But in relation to Europe, how can this can't be sustainable?
Yeah. Yeah, and I don't think it is. I think, I think it's been my theory since last summer. There was a change in tone. I forget who I was talking to about that. I probably mentioned it to you as well in the run up to the election. Our rich people, our oligarchs, they got scared. Somewhere in 2024, they started getting nervous. And Mark Andreessen actually talked about this. Mark Zuckerberg kind of alluded to this. They started getting very worried about things. And that's why, you have all the richest men in the world backing Trump right now. It's not just Musk. You had Bezos jumped in. You had Larry Ellison, who no one knows about him. He's the second richest man in the world. He got behind Trump. Of course, Zuckerberg, some of these lesser guys, and
Peter Thiel.
yeah, I mean, Peter Thiel. I mean, he's a poor guy compared to somebody like Musk. And all these guys got behind Trump, and it's because they were worried. They were very worried about what's happening. But there's no similar rich people in Europe to come to the aid of them, or at least not yet. And that's why they're floundering. But our rich guys all looked around and said, "All right, this isn't working anymore." And it's a good thing. People can scream about oligarchy all you want, but somebody's got to be in charge. And if we're going to pick who's going to be in charge, I want it to be a guy who is sending rockets into space. I don't want it to be some guy who's got a PhD in gender science and thinks he's a woman. I mean, those are the choices. I'm going to go with the rich guy who builds rockets or invented Facebook and or Oracle databases. So I'm welcoming the our oligarchical overlords, at least for now, because they seem to be going in the right direction.
So I mean, what does the future of the EU look like then? I mean, do you see this breakup to where these countries go back to their well here well to go back to their currencies or
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, it's a hard thing to say because we don't really have a good example of this. I mean, we're kind of in a weird territory. We've had countries break up before. Czechoslovakia broke up into two countries, but that was two small countries. It's not a big deal. How do you unwind the EU? I don't know. I mean, I don't know how they do it. I mean, the Brits left the EU, but they didn't have the shared currency. So it's a hard thing. I mean, it's hard to know. I mean, because I think you have all these problems that work against reform. You don't have a business class that can really exert a lot of influence. You don't have a political class that really understands what's happening. It doesn't appear right now that there's any nationalist movement at all in Europe of any consequence. I mean, it's kind of sad in a way. I mean, AFD is pretty successful to a certain extent, and Le Pen's movement. But there really isn't any sort of sensible national patriotic politics. It's, anything that even hints of that gets just attacked relentlessly. So I don't know. I mean, it's one of those things that I think things can change quickly. All of a sudden, look what's happening here. All of a sudden the world is different just in a month. So things can happen quickly. And it's weird sometimes in history that some person comes along. There's going to be some person who's kind of a lefty right now that's going to wake up and realize, what, there's this huge opportunity to adopt anti-immigration and economic, sensible economic policies and that sort of thing. And they'll sweep into power, and that person will become the great reformer. There's always, a surprise. It just right now, I mean, there's no one you look around in Europe that seems potentially, has that potential, but they're probably out there somewhere. I just don't know enough about it.
what about as we come kind of back to the United States, the executive order that was signed in regards to declaring the cartels as a terrorist group. Would the relationship between the United States, Mexico, and Central and Southern America, where do you see that going?
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things. It's kind of like immigration. I did a show. Maybe I can't remember anymore, but I pointed out that immigration is like the easiest thing to solve. It's one of the easiest problems to solve as long as our rich people are committed to it. And I recently did a show on the drug war. Most of the reasons we have drug problems in this country is because our government hasn't even tried to do anything about it. I mean, we knew that the Sackler family was peddling poison with OxyContin. We knew, everybody knew. Our government didn't do anything. We knew. I mean, I stumbled upon this the other day. You remember? Were you around during the '80s during Iran Contra? You were too young for that
I was
probably,
born in
but
'78, so that would have been, what was that?
yeah,
Eight? Yeah.
yeah, yeah, you would have been
I
way
was
too
watching
young. But
GI Joe. The only combat I was familiar with was GI Joe.
yeah, it was this huge scandal where it was the Reagan administration trading arms for hostages, and where they surreptitiously using the arms trade to fund the Contras. Well, it turned out to be far worse than that. It turned out that the CIA was working with the Mexican, was one Mexican cartel at the time, not many, to send cocaine into the United States and use the profits from it to arm the Contras. In other words, our own damn government was selling cocaine into the United States. It's monstrous stuff. Fentanyl labs. We all know where this stuff is being made. So I think if what it's one of those things where if Trump is serious about it and the government's serious about it, they could actually probably do a lot of good, and the Mexicans would probably welcome it because right now the Mexican government's all mobbed up by they're all owned. They're terrified of the cartels, and they should be because the shine, like I forget what I saw somebody broke this out. Like Scheinbaum, the woman who's running the place, she's associated with backed by one cartel based near Mexico City. Slim Pickens or whatever the hell his name was, Carlos Slim. He was the guy who saved the New York Times with a bunch of cash 10 years ago. He owns all the telecommunication in Mexico. He's associated with some other cartel. I mean, it's a narco state, but you can break these things. It's not that hard, and it's a whole legal process. Declaring it them terrorists gives Trump the ability to call in drone strikes and that sort of thing. And you have to believe that there's enough patriotic Mexicans in the government that would say, hey, you know what? I'd rather win this drug war with the Yankees than and help the drug cartel. So yeah, we'll see. I mean, but again, it's not a hard problem to solve. I mean, 100 years ago we didn't have a drug problem, and we didn't have anywhere near the police state we have. So why do we have a drug problem now when we have cameras on every corner? We watch every bank transaction. Why do we have a drug problem now? Well, it's because our government doesn't want to do anything about the drug problem. That's the only answer.
Well, to add to that, I mean, how many Americans? You and I both know some of these people that have been debanked, right? That have been, their livelihood's been completely destroyed for no justifiable reason, with no charges, no nothing. And I'm referencing Peter and Lydia Brimelow of Adair.
Yeah.
So you're telling me that cartels, a hundreds of billions of dollar corporation, however many cartels there are, and how many members are in each one, they're holding this money somewhere. It's not in suitcases and closets. They can't trace where the funds are going. I don't care how many LLCs or how many shell companies that they have. They've got to be able to track the money.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. They know where it's going. And it's um yeah, I mean they have to. I mean, look, they're the when January 6th happened, the cell companies and the banks instantly identified all these people who had used their cards at ATM machines and at hotels and all this, and they used their cell phones, and they turned all this over to the FBI. And somehow or other, we can't catch drugs plowing over the damn border. I mean, it's just absurd. I mean, it's just a ridiculous thing. It's just a matter of preference. The FBI does very little drug interdiction, very little drug cases. And when they do, like the ATF, one of the horrible things they'll do is that the ATF will go into some town or some city and they'll deputize local sheriffs, local police, right? And what they do is they have these guys just start harassing people because they're looking for something. They want to arrest some guy. They're looking for easy work. So the reason they use the locals to do this, though, is the locals have a better feel for things, but they give them federal immunity. So, like in Arizona, like where I live here in West Virginia, if the cops violate your Fourth Amendment rights, you can sue them. They have limited immunity. If I run from the cops and they tackle me and I break my arm, well, I was running from the cops. I can't sue them. But if they come into my house without a warrant and break my arm, then I can sue them, because they violated my rights. Well, the feds aren't subject to this. The feds have just immunity. So this is the kind of stuff they do. And it's completely pointless. I mean, there's a case, the reason I know about this, there's a case actually winding its way up through the courts. It probably will get to the Supreme Court to challenge this idea that the FBI has absolute immunity for violating people's rights, which they do all the time. Unwarranted searches and seizures, wiretaps, all kinds of shenanigans these guys do. None of which has anything to do with preventing crime. They don't do big drug cases anymore. They just don't bother with it. It's a lot easier to harass the Brimelows. That's an easier thing to do, or harass some J6 guys. And that's why I'm hoping that this Cash Patel guy, who seems to have a real attitude. I don't know what it is. He seems to hate the FBI. So putting a guy in charge of the FBI who seems to hate the FBI might turn out to be a very good thing. But he's also head of the ATF. And that's an organization that should just be disbanded. There's no point in it anymore. We don't have rum runners and moonshiners. We're not smuggling cigarettes across the Canadian border. It's just a pointless organization that does nothing but mischief. So I'm optimistic. All this eliminating government stuff we've seen in the last month has got me very excited. Because I never in a million years thought I'd see the day when there's government layoffs. I used to say this. I'd say that there's never going to be a recession in Washington. Well, I may be wrong.
Getting back to Mexico, do you see some type of military strike there, or are they serious about this to the point where they can just go fight after them financially?
Yeah, I mean they could easily probably go after them financially. But we know where these fentanyl labs are. Fentanyl and methamphetamine. It's not like growing weed where you do it in the woods and people can't see it and stuff, and it's hard to find. I mean, these are big labs. We know where the equipment is. We know where all this stuff is. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if Trump, because he's a showman, that we don't have a drone strike on some fentanyl lab in some city in Mexico just to kind of send the point. But I think after that, it'll probably be more cooperative because, again, I just don't think it's that difficult a problem to solve. This can be solved without having to declare war on Mexico. And my guess is the Mexican political class would really like to help. Look, if you're the Mexican political class, you had to be looking at the government of the United States for the last however many years and thinking, look, these guys want us to sell them drugs. So we're going to sell them drugs. Why are we going to try and stop the drug flow when clearly the United States government wants us to sell drugs in the United States? So, you change the incentives around, they'll change their behavior.
Do you worry about retaliation within this country for from cartel members that are already here?
I don't know. I don't know. I mean, we cracked down on the mafia and the Italian mafia, and nothing happened. I mean, it might. I mean, it's always possible, but I just don't think these guys are. The TV has made them out to be supervillains. In fact, I think they're just probably like everything else in Mexico. They're not that great at what they do. It's just that we've made it easy for them, and if we make it hard for them, they'll stop being very good at selling us drugs. I mean, I've done business in Mexico. I've been to Mexico. I'm not impressed by Mexico the best that Mexico has been able to produce hasn't impressed me. So I don't think the Mexican crime lords are, super geniuses or super villains. They're not in hollowed out volcanoes and guys wearing lycra jumpsuits. I don't think that's what's going on. I think they're just very elaborate and wealthy street gangs for the most part.
Would you travel to Mexico or even to Europe right now personally on a vacation?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, Mexico, probably not. I mean, there's just too many problems. But
Well, and wait, before you answer about Europe, why wouldn't you go to Mexico? Based on what you and I just spoke about?
well, I mean, it kind of depends where it is. I mean, I wouldn't go to Tijuana. I wouldn't go. I don't know. I mean, it's one of those things I just don't know because I mean, imagine that there's still lots of people who cross over from say Tucson into what is that? Was that Juarez on the other side? No,
Nogales,
Juarez is on the
Nogales,
other.
Nogales.
Nogales, that's it. Yeah. I imagine there's still a lot of that going on. I guess it really would depend where it is, but honestly, I don't know. I just don't like Mexico all that much to be. It could be the safest place in the world. I probably wouldn't go to Mexico, but like Europe is a different story because it kind of depends what I would go there for. But yeah, it really does depend. 'Cause I think there's going to be a fair amount of anti-Americanism starting up. So I don't know. It kind of depends. It depends what part of I wouldn't go to Ukraine. um, but I mean, I wouldn't go to France at all. I mean, it's just ugly. I mean, so much of Europe now it's like an outdoor amusement park staffed by Muslims. It's just there's something weird about. I mean, when I was in Germany, I just kept thinking. I mean, this is depressing. I mean, that's what I kept thinking. This is the depressing place. There is nothing. There's no joy here at all. And I've been to other places where you're like, man, look, Denmark. Denmark's a great place. Copenhagen's a fantastic city. But Germany just seems depressing. France is terrible. It's like a French Disney World, really. Um, I don't know. I mean, I guess Eastern Europe, maybe. Poland. I haven't been to Poland. I'd like to go to Poland.
What about Central South America?
I don't know. I'm trying to think of can't think of a reason to go there. Oh, I'd like to go see what's the guy's name? His prison. That would be kind of a cool tour.
Oh, and El Salvador Bukele's.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I mean, yeah, that's. I mean, he's volunteered to start housing some of our really bad criminals. I mean, that'd be a pretty awesome idea. I've always said we need to have penal colonies again. When Ray Ray caps Peanut, and this is his 15th time to court. You're not fixing Ray Ray. So send him off to the island, send him off to the penal colony and say, you can live your life the best you can live there, but just, you're not going to swim out of this, penal colony. So that way they're out of our hair. We used to be smart about this stuff, taking people out of the gene pool.
Yeah, well, another thing I want to ask you about, I've been talking about this a lot with other people, and I don't know how much you've been following it, but I'm very interested in this whole Mar-a-Lago Accord and the run that you're seeing on gold right now. Huge amounts of gold that are coming back in the United States. Have you been following that?
I look at this stuff a lot. I've never been a gold bug. Gold will never be our currency. Well, if it is, we're in a lot of trouble. But I think, I mean, I know actually more about the gold business than a lot of people because I've had customers in the wholesale gold business, and it's a very weird business. The way that gold gets made into jewelry, jewelry gets sold, eventually comes back in, it gets turned into gold, and there's it's a funny marketplace in a lot of ways, and there's certain people, it's a small number of people who are in that business, but as far as the movement of gold, gold tends to move where they think it's going to be safe. Although I do think I would love to see Elon Musk and Donald Trump with their clipboards doing the inventory of Fort Knox that they're talking about. You know, Elon and the Doge boys going, I got 4 gold bars here, Trump, licking his pencil, writing down 4 gold bars. Or, of course, it would be hilarious if they open up the vault and there's nothing in there. The gold's gone.
It's like that
But
Geraldo. It's like the Al Capone's vault with Geraldo.
yeah,
Remember that?
yeah, exactly. There's just a note in there of IOUs. Just we owe you 1 gold bar, Dick Schumer, or whatever, Chuck Schumer. So yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think what's going to happen is that the dollar is going to be much stronger because the rest of the world is, first of all, if you're smart money and understands that Russia is going to open up this year. That means about $300 billion worth of business is American business is going to flow back into Russia because they want back in. And the Russians are fine doing business with the dollar. The Chinese, they have both said this. They want to do business with the dollar. We're going to see the dollar strengthen quite a bit. And that means that, people will move assets like gold because, look, we hold a lot of other countries' gold. This is not an unusual thing. We'll see a lot of that. But yeah, I think by the end of the year we could see a very, very strong dollar for the simple reason, it's the way to bet. The United States is back to being the banker of the world because that's the way you have to understand how our economy is built. We're both the mint and the bank. We produce money that the world needs and uses, and we regulate its use. That is really how this system was set up, starting in the 1980s. There's a couple of different treaties, the Palace Accords, the Louvre Accords. That's the way it's supposed to be. And it was running pretty well until the last 10, 15 years, and then things started to go off the rails. And it's clear that Trump intends to put it back on the rails, and that's where we're going back to. So I think we'll see a stronger dollar. The EU will probably decline greatly. The UK, the pound will decline. It's going to be we're going back to a dollar world again, and that'll be good for Americans because we'll even with tariffs we'll start to see imports at good prices.
You're optimistic of where we're at and where we're heading.
Yeah, fairly so. I mean, it's one of those things. The world actually will run pretty well if we don't have lunatics trying to break things. You just sideline the crazy people, and all of a sudden, things tend to work out pretty well. I said before the election, it was a battle between normal and crazy, and normal won. Look, there's a lot of problems to be fixed. There's no doubting it. The United States, we have a fertility rate problem. We have 50 million illegal aliens we don't know what to do with. It's going to take a while to solve to get those people out. We have all these problems with trade imbalances and things like that. I mean, there's a lot of work to be done, but it does seem like our richest people understand this and are working on the solutions. And I mean, that's all you can ask for. You don't solve problems any other way. And you know what? I became super optimistic when they audited the Treasury and they started seeing every check. Because I know a little bit about how the government works, having done business with the government. You can't read the budget of housing and urban development and know who they're paying. It's impossible. It's done on purpose. But you can know exactly who's being paid when you see the checks, the disbursements going out of the Treasury. And when they did that, I knew, okay, these guys are deadly serious. They want to know who's getting the money, and they're finding out that it's worse than they imagined. I kind of imagine that Musk was probably losing sleep at night because I don't think he really believed that the government was screwed up as he as it is. I mean, they're using systems that are written in the 1970s. That I heard a story that the Doge boys, confronted by COBOL code, didn't know what to do. I mean, they're just stymied by this ancient technology, and it's kind of like they're trying to go live with Stone Age cavemen, and learn how to do flint napping and how to wrap a string around your spear so that you can go hunt the bison. And that's the truth of the government, and but they're making an effort, and powerful people are behind this reform effort, and that's all we can ask for.
Yeah. The other thing that I want to ask you about is the future of AI. How serious is this in terms of the effects that it may
Well,
have?
yeah, I've been playing around with this a lot for professional reasons. One of my clients is using AI, or using AI tools to create fake podcasts. They're not podcasts; they're really just recordings, so that like a question that somebody would have an employee about how to do some process, how to enter it into the system, and where to put the paper or the documentation. So they're creating these kind of help things, and so they can be in a database so that employees can search this stuff, find self-service the answers. But instead of reading it, it'll be two people talking to each other. But instead of hiring actors and all this stuff and writing scripts, they're using AI tools. Stuff that would have taken 2 weeks to produce, they're producing in 2 hours. It really is quite amazing, and it's very realistic. They're not writing a script. They're saying, here's the solution, here's the answer. We want create for us a dialogue of a man and a woman, and the man is explaining to the woman what the solution is to this problem, and it's almost perfect right out of the box. I mean, that's really powerful stuff, and you can't tell that it's a robot. I mean, I've listened to it. Unless they told me, I wouldn't have known. Video is pretty close to getting there. They've kind of solved the six finger problem and the three legs issue, which you get a lot of with the AI. But I saw a demo where they took movie clips and replaced the actors with different actors that were just computer generated, and you couldn't know in a million years it wasn't the same person. It really was quite amazing. Now think about this: you get accused of committing a crime. You broke in and stole a bunch of jewelry at a retail store, and you say I wasn't there at all, and I have proof I wasn't, and yet they show video of a guy who looks exactly like you, and then they have a recording of someone who sounds exactly like you planning the crime. How will we know? How will we know which is which? I mean, it's not going to be long before something like that happens, where fake video, fake audio, fake pictures. It's going to change. I mean, that just fundamentally alters how our court system would work. Fake documents. I mean, it's going to be challenging, to say the least. But at the same time, it's going to. I mean, if Indian programmers are going to be all out of work, because generally what you use Indian programming shops for is straightforward coding, where you don't have to they don't have to do any thinking. They just code to a spec. Well, now you just feed it into AI and it gives you the code back. So, and it doesn't cost anything. So that'll be good things. A lot of technical work will come back home in some ways. Call centers. It's already happening. I was talking to someone who does business in the Philippines. They're already feeling the effects of AI at their call centers because companies are already saying, well, geez, we could start using these tools to do customer service, and think about that. You won't know you're talking to a robot when you're asking questions about a problem. You found something on your bank statement, you don't know what it is. You think you're talking to a person, but you won't be. You'll be talking to a robot. So it's going to be a different world. I mean, but the thing about it is that most of the decisions we make in this life are normative decisions. Should I do this or shouldn't I do this? Not based on facts and reason, but based on custom culture, your own habits and taste. AI can't replace that. So it's just going to be another set of tools, but it's going to be a disruptive set of tools. It's going to require a lot of thinking. I mean, look what's happening in Ukraine. The Russians have started putting up into the air drones that are operating independently and communicating with one another. So when they're looking down at the ground, they see collections of Ukrainian troops or Ukrainian equipment. They can decide which ones to attack and whether to attack them in mass. That's pretty damn scary. Here you are, this Ukrainian guy, you're in a trench, and all of a sudden these flying killer robots are in the air, and and they're thinking, I mean, that's terrifying. And so there's going to have to be, there's going to be a lot of adjustment to it because, I mean, look, like where I live, I don't, are you in an urban area where you live?
Phoenix.
Okay. I mean, where I live is very rural. To drive something, there's an Amazon warehouse that's not far from me. I mean, not far. I mean, it's probably, I don't know, 30 miles away. Well, drone delivery to where I live in the boonies here would actually work really well. A little quadricopter come by, drop off the box, head on its way. Yeah, that would be pretty nice. I mean, so it's not all bad news. But at the same time, the government can put those things in the air and look through your windows and see what you're doing. So, it kind of cuts both ways.
Well, also, I look at this as from a white collar standpoint. I mean, why do you need to hire a CPA to do an audit for you?
Yeah. I mean, it's a little bit more complicated because I mean, I do a lot of accounting work. You do have a lot of variation there. There's a lot of decisions to be made, but the rules are already baked into the software for the most part. But where you really will see this stuff take off is like insurance companies. There's no reason at this point where we can't start thinking about they're at the end of insurance companies. Car insurance could be replaced with software. You put in your information, it says, here's your risk probability, here's your premium. You don't need to talk to any people. You don't need people processing claims. This could all be done. A lot of our court cases could be done this way. I mean, think about it. You arrest Ray Ray and Peanut for spray painting something on the side of a building. The cop takes them and stands in front of a kiosk, explains the circle, and the machine says, "Yeah, the probability of them being guilty is 100%. Take them directly to jail, and then we don't have a judge anymore. We don't, they get instant punishment." I mean, I doubt we'll see that, but it's kind of fun to think about.
Well, also too, what about real estate? You're not going to need somebody to buy or sell your house anymore, and even going a step further on the commercial side, real estate development, you could utilize AI.
Yeah, doctors. Doctors will be replaced. I mean, look, I haven't seen an actual doctor. I know he exists. I mean, I'm pretty sure he exists, but I see a nurse practitioner. But they already have me in my plan. I just changed, so we'll see what that's like. When I go get my physical, I answer all the questions a doctor would normally ask. She shows up, the nurse practitioner shows up, and she scans through it. She says, "I don't see anything different here." She takes my blood pressure, and out the door she goes. It's a 5-minute visit. Well, the next step is that I go to a kiosk somewhere, stick my arm in, they take blood, I pee in a cup maybe if I need to. What do I need a doctor for? I mean, because ultimately, all the knowledge in his head can be put into, or it already exists in software. They're already talking about this for like cancer diagnosis and stuff like that. So, it is going to be an interesting world. It's not, killer robots, and it's not we're all going to be unemployed because most of what we do are value choices. That's a different thing. But a lot of stuff, surprisingly, look, cancer research is going to take a great leap forward because, they're able to do things with understanding how proteins synthesize that the processing power allows them to do things that they couldn't do in the past. And so it'll allow for predictive medicine. Hey, based on your genetic makeup and what we're seeing, we can anticipate perhaps you having a problem with cancer of, the liver in 5 years. However, we can mitigate this by giving you a treatment. And so you won't start to have this problem. I mean, it really is that incredible. I mean, you're talking about being able to cure pancreatic cancer. I read a study recently where they're in trials. I mean, stuff like curing cancer. I mean, think about how many people or or had family members die from cancer, or heart disease. A lot of this stuff. I mean, you're not going to live forever, but to have much healthier lives. I mean, I don't. There's no reason to be totally pessimistic about it. But there's a lot of downsides, though. I mean, there's a lot of bad things that can come from AI. So fortunately, I'll be 60 next year. So by the time the killer robots are out there, I'll be too old for them to care about me. So
Do you think it'll get to that point though?
probably not. No, I actually, if you think about it, if robots ever became completely self-aware, intelligent like us, the first thing they would do is leave because we would be so boring that they would want to leave the planet and go someplace much more interesting than us. So, it won't, the idea of the Terminators deciding that they have to kill all humanity now, they're like, it'd be like us saying we have to kill all the ants or all the butterflies. I mean, why would we do this? The robots will look at us the same way we look at ants or beetles or ladybugs. So I think we'll be fine.
Well, and another thing with AI as well is, I mean, I see these Waymo cars all over the place in Phoenix. These self-driving cars.
Yeah, I've seen those before.
They started it in Tempe, and now it's full go all over the place. I see them all the time, like from my neighborhood, side streets, and I think you're going to see more and more of those. And I've been going on an assumption that it'll expand into buses, public transportation. But the question I have with these things is, like in Ohio, where I'm from, or where you're at, when it snows, how the hell?
Yeah.
What do you just ground those things for the day and not put them out there?
Yeah, I mean, rural areas like where I lived, I mean, it could never happen. And then, there's also going to be complications because at some point, one of these things is going to drive over someone, and now there's a liability issue. Who do you blame for it? Ultimately, that's what's going to get down to. I always say that the most important question in the world is who says, right? You have to do this, right? Who says? We always have to know the answer to that. If you don't know the answer to who says, then people aren't going to follow the orders. But ultimately, the second question is going to be, well, who's responsible? Because that's another variation of it. And no matter how much technology you have, we're not going to live in a world in which we say, well, no one's responsible. So when something breaks, we're going to want to hold someone accountable. And that's what all this self-driving cars and stuff like that, there's where, because right now what they're doing is they're getting away with shifting the cost onto the general public. But at some point, someone's going to figure out that, hey, wait a second, these self-driving cars, well, there's a non-trivial chance they'll kill somebody. So your insurance now is 100 times more expensive than it was yesterday. And all of a sudden that they're not going to be as popular as they were. I mean, it's like Uber. Ubers are much more expensive now than cabs, than taxis. People have looked at this. Well, because the liability has now been shifted back. They were getting away with not paying basically for insurance, commercial insurance. Well, now they have to. So the taxis are, we replaced one type of taxi with another.
I'm never getting in one of those Waymo cars. It's funny. I was on a run one day and I saw a guy getting in one, and I yelled at him. I don't even know if he got the joke. I said, "Hey, hopefully your ex didn't order this for you. She might drive you right off a cliff." like,
It reminds me of what was the movie when Arnold Schwarzenegger goes to Mars?
a total recall.
Total Recall.
Yeah.
That's what it kind of
Johnny
reminds me
Cab.
of.
That was called Johnny Cab.
Yeah, I'm surprised they didn't call him that. I mean, there's no way that I would ever engage autopilot in a car. I just wouldn't do that. Because we know in commercial airplanes, we could have autopilot landing, takeoff, flight, because most of the flight is the pilot is mostly in control and takeoff. It goes after that, the computers run the plane and the destination, all that. But the way I've heard it is that psychologically, there's no way we could have self-flying planes. People wouldn't get on them. They just wouldn't trust it, and it's a barrier you can't get past. And I think that's going to be the truth with cars. You're just not going to convince people to do it because all it's going to take is one car to go berserk and start killing the people, and that's the end of it. So I at least in my lifetime.
Get in one of those Waymo cars, man. It'll drive you right to jail.
Yeah, you find out that
There's
you
a
owe
warrant.
somebody money.
Yeah, there's a warrant out
Yeah.
for you. They'll just take you right into the holding area.
Or you've been late on your credit card payment. They drive you over there and they won't let you out until you pay. That's
I'm never getting in one of those things, man. I don't care. I'm not getting in one of those things. I know people have ridden them and they say whatever, but yeah, you go ahead. I'm not getting in one of those. Would you get in one of those?
it kind of depends. If it was like scooting around some low traffic area, yeah, maybe I just as a novelty. But it's kind of like a shuttle bus or something. But no, to like go someplace. No, I'm not. Again, I'm not. Am I going to be in a car or a plane a human being is going to be controlling it. That's pretty much my rule at this point. Even if he's just playing make believe, like you get on a subway and you have the subway conductor, he doesn't do anything, but it just make me feel good and pretend you're driving the train, and then everyone else will be satisfied. So I will not be getting any in any self-driving cars. I mean, if it's going from one side of like because out there you guys have these fake sort of town center sort of deals going on, where you have shopping areas and you mix, what do they call it, mixed use, where there's some,
Apartment living,
condos and
yeah, yeah.
yeah, yeah, So I mean, something like that. But okay, maybe to go from one side to the other, or have it tote you around the golf course. Yeah, see, there's an amazing. I would imagine you'll start seeing those at like golf courses as the boomers get too old to be able to really be able to get around. They'll drive them right up to their ball so they can just hit it out of the out of the golf cart, and then they'll drive them down to follow the ball around. So. And especially out where you are, that'd be very popular.
Yeah, there's an idea right there, Chris.
Yeah, I mean, it'd be like an old person's polo. Could be in their rascal scooters whacking the ball as they're going down.
What about two more questions? Regards to the IRS, the cuts that they're making there. What do you envision for that?
I mean, we really don't need an IRS. Again, there's another problem is that, I do my taxes every year, and I help companies do taxes sometimes, work with their CPAs. And we all say the same thing. There's no reason to be doing this anymore. The rule should have been refined a long time ago, where as you go along, you're being taxed at the appropriate rate, and that there's no reason to come back and do this. And I think what I mean, first of all, they hired up a bunch of eyes, but cutting back. I mean, I think one of the things they're probably going to do is continue to further simplify. I mean, look, Trump's idea is to move the away from income taxes entirely to probably some sort of sales tax, tariffs. I would be for this. I would be for a value-added tax. It's the way that in Europe they have a VAT, and it basically is a sales tax. And that's fine. You get used to it. It just becomes a part of the pricing model. You don't think about it anymore, and that will work just fine. I mean, income taxes are stupid. It's a dumb thing to do. We basically created $1 billion industry of private people figuring out what your taxes are. It's just dumb, and there's no reason for it. So, I mean, don't get me wrong. I love and respect the IRS, and I have nothing but good things to say about them. So I hope and wish them nothing but the best.
Well, the other thing is property tax. What a scam that is.
Well, where I live, like you actually have a revenuer shows up. The tax guy showed up to inspect my house. And he's a nice guy. He's like, he goes, oh, by the way, we're a couple of years behind on our assessments. He says, so we're hoping to catch up this year. So they sent me a thing. My assessment didn't change, but it's very Mayberry-ish around here. When you call the tax office, you actually talk to someone named Ethel, and they sent me this form because they'll tax you if you own a boat or RV or certain kinds of equipment and stuff, and it wasn't all that clear, and you can't go online and fill it out. So I had to call, and she fills it out as I explain it to her. And she says, oh, you're all good. So small town living has its benefits.
What do you think the future of the Democratic Party is?
That's a good question, man. I mean, you talk about a shit show. I mean, that is just, I mean, they got nothing. I mean, all their people are crazy, and they're looking even crazier. It's look back when I was a kid. I mean, I don't really remember this, but in the 70s, they faced the same problem. Reagan won in 80 and 84, and then he won in 88 when Bush won. And maybe Bush wasn't anyone's favorite, but the Democrats, they had no one. They ran Mike Dukakis, who was, I mean, he was one of the worst candidates in the history of the country. I mean, he was just a ridiculous guy. And they were in a similar boat. Now, they recovered, but it was a different country then too. I mean, you look at the people who was on their bench, Ilan Omar and Ocasio-Cortez. These are ridiculous people. There's no way you would ever vote for them. And I think one of the revolutions we see happening with Trump is that people are going to look around and say, okay, I'll consider voting for you, but what kind of businesses have you run? How successful? We're going to I think we're going to start shifting back to where we expect our politicians to have had a successful private career. Either been a good lawyer, run a business, been a successful executive to have something. And Because look, I mean, having Trump and Musk, I mean, look, Musk, people can say what they want about Musk, but Musk has really become kind of a hero in a way. He's this guy who is a can-do guy, kind of represents the American spirit, even though he's not an American. So the Democrats might be in worse shape than they were in the 70s. I mean, I can't think of anybody they can run. I mean, are they going to run Tim Walz? I mean, I mean, he was probably, I mean, I have to admit, I enjoyed watching him. When he did that debate, I laughed so hard, I actually thought I might have broke a rib or hurt myself in some way because I kept waiting for him to put a light bulb in his mouth like Uncle Fester. I mean, he was just an absurd man. But I mean, what do they got?
Hakeem Jeffries.
Yeah, the ice people and sun people guy. I think it's his father came up with that white people are ice people and black people are sun people. He was like a college professor, and that was his thing. East Asians and whites are ice people, and Mexicans and blacks are sun people. And he had this whole theory about how it's this battle between the ice people and the sun people. Oh, his father's, I'm pretty sure it's his father. Nutty as a fruitcake. And but yeah, I mean, or well, I think Westmoreland. He's a black guy in Maryland who's a governor. I mean, the choices aren't good. I mean,
Cory Booker. Cor-
yeah, I'd love him. That would be awesome. Does he still pretending to be married to a woman? 'Cause
I don't even know that. Was that what the rumor is with him? He's gay?
oh
Or is,
yeah,
oh,
I mean, it's
yeah.
not a rumor. Everybody knows. Yeah, yeah. And then he had this woman show up, supposedly his girlfriend for a while, but then that kind of went away. So I mean, look, God bless him, and whatever makes him happy. I'm not I don't care about that stuff, but I just think it was kind of humorous. Or I think that there was a big fat guy in Illinois. What's his name? Pritzker?
Yeah, the governor.
Yeah,
You got
yeah. I mean,
Whitmer. You got Whitmer in Michigan.
oh, yeah. I mean, she's,
Shapiro, Pennsylvania.
yeah. I don't know. I mean, look. I mean, yeah. I mean, maybe Shapiro, maybe Whitmer. I don't know, but I mean, look, they're going to run against J.D. Vance. I wouldn't want to run against JD Vance. That guy, when he stands up on stage and he talks, I mean, that guy, he's a smart guy and he knows how to talk. That's a tough opponent. You might be better off just, I mean, it kind of depends what happens. I mean, if the wheels come off the cart and we're in a great big recession in 2 years, who knows? But, I mean, I don't see that coming, but yeah, I don't know. I mean, maybe Shapiro, I don't know. But you know what though? Look, I don't think. I don't think Americans would care about him being Jewish that much, but the Democrats would. The Democratic Party, I mean, they really didn't like Lieberman as the vice presidential candidate in 2000. They really they struggled with that. And that's because he got a lot of the pro-Palestinian, anti-Israel people in the Democratic Party. I mean, I think he would have a tough time getting a nomination. Um, Whitmer, I mean, she just reminds that, she's a bunny boiler. She's one of these people that, she's the crazy ex-wife. Everybody, every man over the age of 30, they know what the hell she's all about. So I'm not sure how far she would get.
What about one more? The future of Kamala Harris. Do you see her becoming the next governor of California?
She should go on The View. They should give her a talk show. She'd be good at that. Get a TV show. She could make some money. She could cackle, be silly. Look at all those daytime shows. What is it? Drew Barrymore. She's got a daytime show.
Jennifer
The
Hudson and
View.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. She'd be good at that. I mean, and she could smoke weed in the morning, have 4 or 5 Chardonnays in the afternoon, just as long as she's sober enough for taping. I mean, it's a good life for her. Because I mean, look, she was drunk or high a lot during the campaign.
I think people would watch that actually.
Yeah, yeah, it'd be fun television. I mean, look, it's daytime TV. I know there's these guys who do like a comedy bit. They're what the hell are the name? Revenge of the Sis or something like that. They're YouTube Rumble sort of guys, and they always do clips from Drew Barrymore, and because she's just unintentionally funny. It's just kind of goofy, sort of middle-aged woman television, and Kamala Harris would be perfect at it. She'd be happier. Her husband would be happier. That's what she should do. I mean, could you imagine her as governor? I mean, it's just silly. I mean, it's ridiculous. So
I never thought Cuomo would get back in it either, and to now he wants to be the mayor of New York City. I never thought. I mean, why would anybody even consider voting for that guy based on how he handled COVID? But here we are.
I mean, when your choices are what they are, and at least I think I guess, I'm old fashioned in this way. I want the mayor of New York to sound like somebody out of the Godfather movies. I think that I just think that that should be a requirement. You have to get screen tested and you make sure you sound like an extra. You sound like you're going to send Luca Brasi over to solve the problem. Yeah, because that would be great. We kind of get back to tradition. Because look, I mean, New York is on autopilot anyway. The bankers, they take care of things for the most part. So, why not?
Where can people find you, Chris?
thezman.com. And I got the Wednesday night at 8 o'clock, I think, live show with Ramsey Paul. So tune in to my Twitter. I'll put a link up, or Ramsey Paul's Twitter. He'll put a link up every Wednesday night.
8 o'clock Eastern?
Yes, 8 o'clock Eastern.
And that'll be what, hour?
Yeah, we do 1 hour on a Wednesday night.
Great. Well, I look forward to watching it. Chris, as always, I appreciate you coming back, and we'll continue to follow all this along, and probably won't be too far down the road where we're talking again.
Yeah, well, if we get into the spring, I'll have to I'll shave my beard off, so you get to. Yeah, I'll lose my Muslim beard.
See the corporate look on you?
Yeah, I don't know. Odds are that's probably not going to happen. I just hate shaving, so there's no statement being made here. This is just laziness.
I appreciate it. Thanks for coming on, Chris, and we'll talk soon.
All right, sounds good.
Mic drop.